using our method of choosing elements for C, remember, it's ensuring that we have a skew-symmetric property with 1/2 m dot in C. Ends up being C equals h theta 2 dot, h theta 2 dot plus h theta 1 dot minus h theta 1 dot 0. Where h is equal to negative m2 L1 LC2 sine theta 2. So all this stuff has been done for you in the code that I gave you. So you don't even have to type any of this in. It's all done in that code. So it's basically it allows you to understand what I've written in the code. I did write in all the expressions for this, so this isn't exactly what it looks like in the code because I actually went through and substituted what I have for these, okay, in the code. So it doesn't look exactly like this, but that's how I got that expression. So anyway, this is going to be really handy. We'll see these Coriolis and centripetal terms with this skew-symmetric property is kind of handy. Because those forces aren't doing any work, Coriolis and centripetal forces aren't doing any work, you don't really want to try and cancel them out with a nonlinear control, which is different than friction. Like if you think about friction, friction is actually doing work and slowing you down. So you actually want to design your control force to overcome friction explicitly, right? So friction doesn't slow you down. Or gravity is doing work. Gravity is doing work because it's pulling your robot down. You actually want to design a nonlinear controller to overcome gravity so that it doesn't sag. But Coriolis and centripetal forces, you don't necessarily want to design your controller to overcome those because they're not doing any work. So you'd be putting extra effort into your controller that you don't really need. So we'll see later, but we won't see that quite yet. But we'll see how this is kind of handy, where it kind of reduces the amount of control effort you need from your electric motors. Okay. So that's kind of the handy thing about it. It's not like you couldn't cancel these out. You can. It just takes extra effort that you don't really need. So next we're going to do flexible joint robots. So let's take a break and come back and finish off and do the flexible joint robot. Does there any? Well, I guess I should ask if anyone has any questions before the rigid robot before I let you take off. Any questions with the rigid robot first of all? Rigid robot dynamics. So we'll talk about the flexible joint robot next, and then we'll talk about the code that I gave you and see if you have any questions about it. We'll go through it a bit up on the screen. And I'll give you your quizzes back again if possible. Okay, let's meet back in at 3:30. Let's meet back at 3:30 on the flexible joints.
So LC1, if your robot's symmetric is half of L1, basically. Like if it's the same thickness.
So you have to take into account the weight of the motor and the gears.
Oh yeah, I guess
That's going to be weighted at one side.
Yeah,
So it should be much closer to that motor. That's kind of the way I should report the gears closer to that motor.
Oh, okay. But I did L1 and L2 are the actual length of the link.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't get a chance to draw that out.
You can slow me down. It's no problem.
Yeah, well, by the time I noticed you were erasing it, because I was writing the subject. I look up, it's kind of like, okay, it's not a long one.
I was gonna ask you one question. So, on backstepping, my understanding was one of the authorities on the list is stick. Is he's got a textbook out called Nonlinear Adaptive Control. Does that have anything?
Way more complex than what we need for.
Okay, all right.
It's like, we're gonna do simple stuff.
Okay.
That textbook's like super complicated stuff that we don't need to get into.
Okay. No, the money is.
Exactly.
Thank you.
You think this is supposed to be C2 right now, too? JC2.
JC2 should be,
This is.
I think it comes from differentiating this term.
So this one, yeah, so,
That's this here.
yeah.
So that ends up here. So you're right, there should be LC2.
LC2.
Thank you. Check my code too, make sure I didn't make a mistake.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Well, I'll get to see that code.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, to understand. I'm just used to OO. And I was like, what's up functions? Nice. I understand why.
That's why MATLAB sets it up. MATLAB sets it up so it's way easier to write functions in separate files.
Yeah.
Code like a normal code is really hard in MATLAB.
And you can't really translate it to C, right? So use object oriented or.
Probably not. The C code is pretty limited right now. They're slowly expanding it to include everything in MATLAB, but it's a slow process. But right now, their basic functions finally work. Like even a couple years ago, it didn't really work. So it's just lately that it's good enough that you can use it now for regular MATLAB. So as they add in functionality, we can start adding in. So a lot of the toolboxes are not made, not C code yet. Anything that's not a toolbox is basically set down. There's still little things here that are annoying. You can't save, you can't load. I mean, that would be really handy.
Eventually.
If you just type in save, save in the so much better.
Yeah. I tried playing around with the .NET stuff in it. Apparently you could load DLLs in it too.
You should be able to load DLLs.
Sorry?
You should be able to load DLLs.
Yeah, but the problem is you can't unload it, you have to close MATLAB,
Oh.
and then reload it back on.
The way I have it set up is a bit primitive because it compiles it every time you run it. If you're a bit smarter than the way I did it, you can have it pre-compiled and just be able to run it every time with different parameters. So the way I set it up is kind of slow because it always compiles. Whereas you should actually be able to avoid that stuff if you wanted to. You're like, why is it compiling every time? It's the same code.
The reason why I was looking into the .NET stuff is because I'm so used to .NET and C#. So I'm like, well, just make a whole DLL and then call that, or ask MATLAB to call the function to it.
Okay.
It's a little faster. And easier for me.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is definitely not the only way to do it the way I did it. This just happens to be what occurred to me at the time. And the way that it's convenient for me in my research, actually, too. If you're doing something that's different objective than I do, it makes sense to code it differently too. Because in my code, I'm always, every time I run it, I should do that so as well. Whereas a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people just change the function parameter, in which case it doesn't make sense to compile it. Change the parameters.
Write it all at fast, just wait.
Yeah, exactly. If you're doing like just a if you're just doing like a controller where you're just gonna try it once, taking any time to compile it, and then just run it out. The time to compile it takes. The way I'm doing it is I run it like thousands of tries. It's way faster. It could be quite possible in your first project.
Is there further optional?
Why C and not C++? Just C works in MATLAB.
I think that's the only interface, or it only supports C interface right now.
Well, why would you use C++? I mean, C++ is like object-oriented C. I mean, if you're going to set up a graphical user interface, C++, whatever it is, if you wanted to set up a GUI system, you're going to have GUIs,
Yeah.
C++. But if you want to do that, there's no reason to use C++.
There's a couple other things, but I'm not a software developer, so I don't know.
No, C++ is strictly for graphical interfaces.
Oh, okay.
You get a web page or a drop it. Like, do something with byte range, it would push me into C++. Or if you just do hardware programming, you just know functions in C++ that will helpful for you.
C would just be faster, no matter what it is. Using objects is a bit more foolproof, but I think there's a little bit more of it. It's just different modules, objects.
I used to write everything in Java, so it made it easy for me to clean up. I used to watch everything that's real time. So I used to write all this code in Java.
I don't think Java is all that much faster.
It is in Windows, it's not in Windows. That's why I stopped using it.
I could see and it's like as you can manually just
There's a downside to
raise and
it.
stuff.
You have to make sure you delete all the old files.
It's not a super useful functionality. There's very few times you actually want to
Yeah. Well,
it's an extremely unusual situation.
yeah.
Java's really nice for that because it has a garbage collector.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have to worry about deleting your pointers.
Well, Java's, nobody does C++ uses Java. If you're actually doing actual, millions of lines of code programs, you're doing C++.
Well,
You can never debug it. If you had like a password in C++, you never get to
I heard everyone at least does C++ for like game engines and simulations and that sort of thing. Because it runs way faster than Java.
Yeah, and they spend significant amount of time debugging that.
I don't hate to be this principal with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's when you really need the speed. They pay the price.
Well-
But they don't want to, they just have to.
I think what they do is they write the core of it in C++, and then they have
Create interfaces.
like, and interfaces and like scripting language that you can't break anything according to the script. So that, but all of their physics, stuff that affects your frame rate, I think is all on the faster languages.
Depends how you use it.
Java is still by far the most popular.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, if you don't have to worry much about performance, right, like it's an application.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's just so much cheaper, right? Because you don't spend so much time debugging, it's expensive to take and convert it to debug code.
Yeah, of course.
You can have a language that's fast. Especially, once you MATLAB, once you MATLAB into whatever machine language you have around just as fast, so you can also learn to use MATLAB because it's 10 times faster to debug than Java. So,
I don't get what I didn't put. Yeah, you love this question, really good
Okay, so harmonic drive gearing is very handy. So like I said, you want a lot of gear ratio with current electric motor technology. I mean, eventually when they invent electric motors that have a lot of torque, then you won't need a harmonic drive. But you know, that'll come down eventually. Probably all electric motors will be like direct drive. But until they invent such a system, we're kind of probably stuck with harmonic drives for a while in terms of robotics. So basic idea is that there's a flexible component. So you can see this red thing here is this like maybe not best way. This is actually probably really bad. This is probably really bad animation, or probably at least it's the only animation I can find on the internet, but it's probably not real good anyway. So it's not. I guess it's a bit too accurate. But anyway, so this whole thing around here is flexible, okay? And the oval component in the middle is rigid, okay? And the whole idea is that it only touches in two places, right? So you have these gear teeth meshing, but the gear teeth only mesh in two places. And then your number of gear teeth are on the outside, and your number of gear teeth on the inside might only differ by like 1. Sometimes 2, sometimes 3, but a very small number. So that when this thing goes, so if it only differs by 1 gear tooth, for example, then when this thing goes around once, the whole flexus spline assembly has shifted by 1 gear tooth position. So this thing would have to go around, you know, typically have to go around like 200 times inside before the outside made 1 rotation. So that's where you get that like 200 to 1 gear ratio really easily. So I guess the disadvantage is this flexibility. So, you know, obviously it's a 3-dimensional structure, so it's more like a cylinder. So that whole cylinder has to be flexible. So it's called a flexi spline. So it's kind of this flexible cylinder, and that whole thing bends like a spring, right? I don't know if that makes sense. Any questions about how a harmonic drive works? Yeah.
Not specifically about harmonic drives, but why aren't worm gears used? Achieve similar type.
Trouble with a worm gear, like a worm gear isn't back drivable. So harmonic drive, it actually ends up being back drivable is actually a really desirable feature a lot of times in a robot. There's other advantages to harmonic drive besides just the gear ratio. So if you torque on the thing quite a bit with like any traditional gearing system, including worm drives, the gearbox, you can basically see smoke coming out because all the gears have, I don't know what you call it, but all the gears are basically gone. You've fried your gearbox. The friction has erased all your gears essentially, and you no longer have a gearbox anymore. And the same thing can happen to a worm gear as a traditional gearbox. So that is another advantage of the harmonic drive, is you're very unlikely to torque it enough that you're going to strip these gears off and have it start smoking. I mean, it's probably theoretically possible, but probably the flexi spline would probably actually rip in half before that actually happened. So that is a big advantage as well. But yeah, like it is really nice to have, like with the harmonic drive is back drivable, so you could actually grab a robot that's powered down and move it around by hand where you want it to go. So it's kind of a nice, kind of a safety feature too, I guess. But like with a worm gear, if you grab the robot, you wouldn't be able to move it anywhere and just be stuck in that position. And I'm not sure it's real. The nice thing about the harmonic drives too is it's all in line, so you just have this like cylinder at the joint, whereas worm gears would definitely still be fairly bulky at the joint, I think, if you tried to design it like that. Any other questions? And I think a worm gear would also be rather, let's see, maybe not, I don't know. I won't say it. In case I'm wrong. flexible joint robots. So nearly all industrial robots are robot manipulator arms. Are now built with harmonic drives. Or harmonic drive gearing at the joint. So the harmonic drives are flexible. Might use the word elastic. So I'm going to use the word elastic and flexible kind of interchangeably. Can be confusing when you Google flexible robots, because some people mean flexible robots or robots that are capable of doing lots of different things. But if you Google elastic robots, you're more likely to get what I'm talking about up on your screen. The model here we have the IF motor in our robot, and we have rigid angle phi I. We have a gear ratio. Ni is the gear ratio. We have an output angle. Phi I from the gears. We have an elastic element modeled with a spring with deflection delta I, and we'll have output angle theta I. So this is a model because in the harmonic drive, the gear ratio and the spring are all kind of one mechanism, but here we're kind of like pretending, I guess, that first there's a gear ratio and then there's an elastic element. It's not exactly like reality. So the angle between links can be written theta I is equal to phi I over Ni plus delta I. Where phi I is the motor shaft angle, Ni is the gear ratio, which for harmonic drive should be pretty high. Delta I is the elastic deflection. So the kinetic energy is the sum of 1, kinetic energy of the links, two, kinetic energy of rotation of the drive rotors. So you kind of have the you have a kinetic energy on this side, and you have a kinetic energy on this side. Like a kinetic energy on both sides of the spring. We didn't have to do it when it's rigid. Everything's rigidly connected. There's this one kinetic energy. As soon as you're connected by a spring, you end up with two differential equations. So you really have two different kinetic energies. So the angular velocity of the ith rotor is mega rotor I equals the sum from j equals 1 to I minus 1 of bj theta j dot plus bi phi I dot, where bi is a unit vector describing the direction of rotation for joint I. So for example, we're really talking about a planar robot that has a shoulder joint but that's only moving in 2 dimensions, and an elbow joint that's moving like that. So in that case, if I have a planar robot like that, the easiest thing to do is just say that this is y direction, this is x direction, so my z is going to be like straight up. So in that case, this joint is rotating about z, and this joint is rotating about z. And I'm not talking about a robot that has any other shoulder joint like my arm does. So just like the robot in the lab. So in that case, I just have 0, 0, 1 describing my unit vector. So it's just that just means that it's rotating in z. Z is pointed straight up, so it's a planar robot. So that's what I would use for this particular robot we're talking about. So using the fact that I know the velocity of the link already, mega link I is just the sum from j equals 1 to I of bj theta j dot. And defining the angle phi I just to be the angle after the gear ratio reduction, i.e. measured after gear reduction. Then I get expression illustrate. Then the kinetic energy is rotor equals 1/2 sum of I equals 1 to n of omega rotor I transpose times this j sub I, this inertia, omega rotor I. So the result after substitution and proper choice of coordinate systems so when I think and again, when I say substitution here, definitely thinking just some lines of MATLAB symbolic math to get it straight out for you. Nothing too onerous on your part. And when I say proper choice of coordinate systems, that's where I'm really talking about, thinking this planar robot where Z is going straight up. If I have Z going at an angle, it's going to be really complicated expression for me. But if I stick Z going straight up, so that my joint is rotating about Z, then these expressions become fairly simple. So, T